I'm the chairperson of the Shrewsbury School Committee. Welcome to our meeting of January 27th. Due to the inability of the Shrewsbury Media Connection staff to support a broadcast from Town Hall this evening, we are meeting remotely. However, our meeting is being shown live on Selco channels 29 and 329, and it is being streamed live on Shrewsbury Media Connection's website. I would like to thank Shrewsbury Media Connection Executive Director Mark Serra, as well as Shrewsbury Public Schools IT Director Brian LaRue, who help with all of our meetings. Tonight, the first on the agenda is public participation. No one has asked to address the committee this evening, but if anybody wishes to do so in the future, please contact us at schoolcommittee@shrewsbury.k12.ma.us. Next is chairperson and members report. Does anyone have anything this evening? Mr. Wensky.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to make a quick announcement of my intent to run for re-election for school committee in this year's town election on May 4th. It's been a privilege to serve as one of 5 voices on the committee, and I'd be honored to serve again for Shrewsbury. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good news, thank you. Next is superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Fritz. 2 items I'd like to share this evening. First off, I want to say thank you to Senator Michael Moore. As part of the legislative budget package, he was able to add in allotment of $25,000 for the school district to address COVID pandemic related costs. We will be using that funding as part of our surveillance pooled testing initiative that I'll speak to a little bit. We really appreciate the senator's advocacy for much needed funding as we continue to navigate our way through these challenges. Secondly, I did want to let the community know that we have made a decision that we will not be able to offer our traditional summer enrichment program this coming summer. There are just too many unknowns at this point. It's a program that takes a lot of planning up front, and families need to be able to make plans for the summer in terms of their children, whether that's for childcare purposes or just generally their students enrichment purposes. I want to be clear that we will be holding our special education summer program, as well as our summer program for English language learners. Those are critically important academic programs. It is possible we might stand up some additional academic programming in the summer. We'll know more as we go further into the spring. But one issue is that we may need more space, just like we did this past summer. If we're still doing the kind of distancing that we need to do now, we need more space, of course, for our special education mandated programs. And the bottom line is just there are too many open questions that where we could responsibly plan for that program. So we'll be communicating that out to families so that they know and have that certainty that unfortunately is something we won't be able to offer this summer. And we'll look forward to the following year. Our expectation is to bring that back better than ever. And that is Superintendent's report this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Next on the agenda is our typical update on the district's response to the pandemic, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Sawyer and staff.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fritz. I'm going to share my screen. Just confirm you can see that. Okay, thank you. At this point, I would like to provide another update to the community regarding how our district is responding to the pandemic. As always, we want to begin with our key messages that we continue to prioritize the health and safety and well-being of our students and our families and our staff. Our focus is to continue to develop a safe environment that prioritizes well-being and enables high levels of learning, and that we continue to follow the guidance of public health authorities and medical experts while closely monitoring the latest information and developments, and we'll share some of the latest data with you this evening. In terms of our current case count this week so far, this calendar week, we've had 13 cases, which brings us to 287 cases in the hybrid program since the beginning of the school year. We had 1 additional case of possible exposure in school that I'll speak to in a bit, raising that number to 4. We did not have any cases in a remote program this week. We did last week, have 1 additional. This is a trend we hope to continue to see, whereas we were up in the 30s the weeks just prior or just after the Christmas holiday and the New Year holiday, which abated to 25 for the week of the 10th, and then the week of the 17th, the calendar week that was last completed, that case count for our district in the hybrid model was down to 15, which is mirroring some of the reductions in case counts we're seeing overall in the community as well. As far as the Johns Hopkins rating of positivity rates on a 7-day basis, Massachusetts is back under the 5% threshold at 4.62%. It was about 5.5% when I reported to you a week ago. And that again is a promising trend that we hope to see continue. As far as the 14-day positive test rate that the state reports for the town of Shrewsbury, that in the last report of January 21st, that was down to 7.52%, which is lower than the previous, still higher than the 5% benchmark. Obviously, we want to see that line continue to move in a downward direction in the coming weeks. It is important to note that data, just as the data on this slide, is for the week of December, the 2 weeks, 14 days, December 27th through January 9th. So that's actually a fairly trailing statistic from those weekly public health reports. So that report came out last Thursday, and it was for the previous 2 calendar weeks to that. But again, we've been reporting this all along. I want to continue to show people this data. We were at 413 cases over those 14 days, at just under 30 cases per day, 74.7 cases per 100,000 over a 14-day period in the red zone. Those numbers we know will be coming down in the next report or two because of the actual cases we know of at this point. Again, the Rockefeller Foundation provides us with a helpful schematic indicating that if we are implementing the 5 key mitigation strategies, that there is a low risk of transmission in schools, and that's something obviously that we're working very hard to maintain. The state guidance we continue to follow is that we should be looking for transmission in schools, and we should be prioritizing in-person learning in a hybrid model at least, if we are not seeing in-school transmission in any kind of way that is spreading beyond isolated cases. And that is due to interactions in the school setting, and that's been very, very limited. Again, if feasible, we want kids in person, and within the red zone, they suggest a hybrid model, and we've continued with that, other than the week pause we took after the holiday vacation. I want to emphasize once again, for those watching, that one of the reasons that our hybrid model has been successful is that it is maintaining stability for our students and staff, because it minimizes the number of close contacts if someone does come into school with a case, and the vast majority of people who bring a case into school, of those cases that we've seen, and that we have not had to do much shifting to full remote instruction and ping-ponging back and forth between those modes. And again, we just continue to follow guidance from public health and medical experts and look at the data to determine whether or not our risk factors are such that we can continue the stability of the hybrid program. As far as suspected in-school transmission, as I mentioned, we have a 4th suspected case that just emerged today at the Coolidge School. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health has indicated to us that they will once again send its mobile testing unit to investigate whether there was any further spread. When they sent the mobile testing unit to look at cases at Parker Road and Coolidge back in December, it was able to be determined that there were no other positives, and that those were both limited to just 2 individuals in each case. There was a 3rd case among a small group of employees who don't interact with students as well, that was isolated between 2 individuals. These 4 cases among the total number of cases in our hybrid model represent just under 1.5% of the total cases. So again, 98.5% of our cases that we've had in our schools that have been identified with positive tests among students and staff have come not as a result of transmission in school, but from other factors, and 1.4% are suspected to be potential transmissions within school. I do want to mention again, we discussed this last week, we are beginning a pooled surveillance testing program. The real emphasis for this is prevention. This is not an intent for us to provide sort of a convenient stop the spread and testing kind of site in our schools. Rather, by having a heavy majority of our staff, which will be the first phase, being tested in a pooled testing mode, we'll be able to create some peace of mind by knowing and catching cases early before someone's symptomatic. If someone's symptomatic, they shouldn't be coming to school in the first place. They should be going to get tested through their healthcare provider. But this surveillance testing is for our staff initially who are not symptomatic, so that we can catch those cases before people become symptomatic and again, create an even safer environment than the one we've had to date. So we are beginning next week with our staff, and our staff need to fill out a consent form by tomorrow to be in the testing that will start. It'll be done next Wednesday. We're hopeful for a very high level of participation. We'll report back at our next meeting to let you know how that's going. We're intending to start student testing at the high school in mid to late February, and then potentially roll it from there down to the upper middle school level. We will be using the shallow nasal swab test. It'll be self-administered. We do expect results within 24 to 36 hours. People will be notified if they are test positive. Otherwise, they won't get any information, or they won't get it's a no news is good news situation, I guess I would say, where no one will be, you don't have to look for your test results. You'll be contacted if you are positive, which we hope is a very small number, of course, among our population. And again, it's not mandatory, but it is highly encouraged. We are finalizing our vendor. We have finalized our vendor at this point. We're starting ahead with weekly staff testing. We're not utilizing the DESI program because we felt the one that we were able to select it gives us some superior ability to minimize any staffing costs, and also the ability to identify positive cases without retesting. And we are going to be funding this from a variety of COVID-related grants, federal as well as the recent state $25,000 grant that or allotment that Senator Moore was able to procure for us. And finally, I will just emphasize again that we continue to hold out hope and know that better times are coming. We're looking forward to vaccinations rolling out in the near future for school staff when we enter into the third part of phase 2 of the state's plan. And we need to just continue to look at what our current circumstances are, make decisions based on a balanced view of risk after we review data and after we consult with the experts. So that is the update this evening that I wanted to provide to the committee and to the community, and would be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Mrs. Fritz, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, just a question regarding the testing that is done when a case is found in the classroom. How soon after a student tests positive do they test the rest of the members of the class?
When we had the experience in December, it was about 2 days after we had the knowledge of the positive result. We are hoping that that will be a similar turnaround time. We don't have that confirmed yet, but the state did confirm that they are going to send out the mobile testing unit. In this case, again, we've been able to isolate it to one cohort of students. We have the alternating cohorts, so one classroom, and it's just one of the cohorts in that classroom. They will not be attending school, that cohort, tomorrow and Friday. We're hopeful they'll be able to get the testing done in the next couple of days, and then they would not be due back in school again until the following Thursday. So we should have plenty of time to know if there's any additional results. But it was a quick turnaround, and we're hopeful for that to happen again.
And they're tested once with this sort of exposure, or is there a second test at a later time?
The state provides that one test at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Seeing none. Great. Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Again, I think these updates are very helpful, and I know the public and the community is grateful for these very timely updates that we're receiving. So thank you again. Okay, great. Next, we are going to move on to our public hearing. As everyone knows, we are opening the new major Howard Beale School for students in grades K through 4 in the fall of 2021. And this will require a redistricting of our elementary school zones. And at our meeting on January 20th of 2021, the redistricting committee presented 2 recommended redistricting options to the committee. And tonight, we are having a public hearing to hear input from the community to the committee and to school administration regarding these 2 redistricting scenarios. And this input is being received prior to our vote, which is scheduled for February 10th. And again, this is a public hearing. The purpose of a public hearing is for input. And we're asking that anyone speaking with us this evening limit their comments to about 3 to 5 minutes to allow everyone to have the opportunity to be heard. Because we are virtual, everyone is joining us by telephone this evening. We do have a list of attendees. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, probably by about 15 minutes. So I know there are more people signed up. Others may join us. So I do think there'll be plenty of time as we move through for the others who have asked to speak this evening to join in. So how this will work, and hopefully we'll get this right, as when you want to speak, once we open the meeting, there will be a button. You can raise your hand and we'll recognize that you want to speak. Mr. LaRue will allow you into the meeting so that you will be able to address the committee. And I think there'll be you'll be told to unmute so that you'll be able to be heard by the committee. So is everybody ready? Well, hopefully this is all going to work. Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Ms. Fritz, and appreciate the interest from people who want to address the committee this evening. If I could just preface the public forum portion for those who may be tuning in for the first time to this process, just to give a little bit of background before we begin. This will be actually the 3rd opportunity for public feedback. We had 2 different community forums as the process unfolded. This process began a year ago, a little before a year ago, certainly last fall, or in the fall of 2019, the school committee adopted a set of guiding principles for a redistricting committee to follow. That committee was formed and first met in January a year ago in 2020, and had a few meetings up until the pandemic began in March, at which point the project went on hiatus. Thankfully, our partners with AppGeo were able to continue to do some work during that time, critically important work relative to demographics and geographic information system mapping. And Priya Sankalia, who is the project lead from AppGeo, is with us this evening in case there are any technical questions that the school committee wants to have responded. Mr. Collins, the assistant superintendent for finance and operations, has organized and led the project. And I'll just ask him to give a brief overview again for people who may be tuning in for the first time as to the process that the redistricting committee went through. Redistricting committee was parents from each of the elementary attendance zones, currently Beale, Coolidge, Floral Street, Patton, and Spring Street. There were excellent parent representatives who really contributed a lot to the process. Ms. Fritz and Mr. Wensky from the school committee served on the committee. From the elementary leadership team, Tiffany Ostrander, the principal at Coolidge, and Brian Mabey, the principal at Spring Street School, were the representatives, and then myself and Mr. Collins from the district administration. But maybe if Mr. Collins could give just a brief overview, again, to give context before our guests begin their public comment.
Sure. I'll just add a couple of brief comments, and that is just picking up where you left off, that the redistricting committee did really fabulous work on this project and looked at a number of different iterations of possible scenarios to recommend to the school committee. And they were numerically sequenced. And so, we have, of course, the latest 2, the last 2, which were recommended to the school committee, scenarios 18 and 19, tell you just how many different scenarios that were looked at along the way. This project is data dense. We're talking about 2,200 kids, number of schools. We've got guiding principles that are, as we've discussed before, inherently conflicting. And so it's a complex project, but I can tell you that we had lots of meetings with the redistricting committee, looking at all these various options. We've provided regular reports to the school committee, as you know, and then also held 2 community forums for parents to receive updates. And all of that information we've been kind of cataloging on our website, including the meeting minutes of the redistricting committee, the community forum videos, maps to look at right now if people want to drill down on what the scenarios look like and where your home is and what zone it would be, what elementary school would be assigned to, is all available right now on the website and has been along as part of this process. So those are just a couple more pieces of information about the process leading up to tonight.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Collins. So we're going to move right into the public hearing, and the first hand that I see up are Sarah and Jason Port. And I would like to ask, as you come into the meeting, that you state your name and address for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right. This is Sarah Port. I know it says Jason, but he's off reading a bedtime story. I first want to thank both the school committee and the redistricting committee for allowing parents to have a voice in this really challenging and really important project. I'm really grateful for the work that's been done so far and really impressed by the thoroughness and the thoughtfulness of the committee's process. It's been really, really impressive.
Sarah, could I just have you state your address for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, you missed that. I was just going to say that my husband and I live on 3 Park Street West, which is in the Patton 4 district. We have one son who is currently a 2nd grader at Patton School. And, you know, in engaging in this process or watching the folks go through the process on the committee, you know, we were well aware that there is unfortunately no perfect solution here that leaves everyone satisfied, and definitely didn't expect that our family should be exempt from any changes. However, given that we live within 1 mile from both Patton and Spring Street schools, we were really surprised when we saw that in all the initial scenarios presented, our son would be moved to Floral Street School, which is over 2 miles away. So we had the opportunity, as Dr. Sawyer said, to express our concerns to the redistricting committee after the community forum. And they very graciously took and implemented changes based on the parent feedback that they received. And we were so pleased when we saw that the committee had now recommended a new scenario where Patton 4, as well as I believe it's Patton 3 and several other districts, stay at their current schools. So I've written to all the school committee members, and I just wanted to come on tonight to ask again that you strongly consider scenario 19 as the final choice for redistricting. This scenario has the least impact on current students, which in any year is important, but certainly after a year of such unprecedented change and stress for our children, I think that, you know, that really should be paramount in this decision. We also know that the Patton 4 area is already really densely populated with little, if any, room for development, but also very few school-aged children. The Floral Street School area, on the other hand, is much more likely to have development and increased enrollment in coming years. So scenario 19 allows Floral Street to keep lower enrollment numbers both now and in the future. And it also aligns with the committee's goal of prioritizing the neighborhood school. As I said, I've written to all of you, so I won't take up anyone else's time tonight, but just want to end with that we think that scenario 19 makes the most sense for our children, for our community. We're grateful again for the opportunity to speak tonight, and we look forward to hearing the decision in over a week.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us this evening. Okay, next I see Adiola. If you could join us, please. And Adiola, if you could, I don't want to mispronounce your last name. If you could do that for us, as well as state your address.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adiola Mbaname. 85 Colonial Drive is my address. Good evening, Shrewsbury School Committee and Redistricting Committee. First, to set expectations, I'll require a little over 5 minutes of your time, and I promise I will make it worthwhile. So thank you in advance for your undivided attention. I am a parent of 2 Black children at the Spring Street School. I am grateful for the work the school committee and redistricting team has done so far. I am, however, concerned that both proposals presented at the January 20th school committee meeting will further contribute to the racial imbalance and racial isolation of our Shrewsbury Elementary School students in violation of Massachusetts general law. According to the Massachusetts General Laws, Part 1, Title 12, Chapter 71, Section 37D, whenever the Board of Education, in this section called the board, find that racial imbalance exists in a public school, it shall in writing notify the school committee or regional district school committee having jurisdiction over school that such findings has been made. Section 37C says, it is hereby declared to be the policy of the Commonwealth to engage all school committees to adopt as educational objectives the promotion of racial balance and the correction of existing racial imbalance in the public schools. The prevention or elimination of racial imbalance shall be an objective in all decisions involving the drawing or altering of school attendance lines, establishing of grade levels, and the selection of new school sites. Here are a couple of specific examples where both proposals 18 and 19 being put forth for review have furthered racial imbalance and racial isolation. Number 1, in both proposals, the northernmost zone of the current Spring Street School District is redirected to the Walter Patton School. Under either proposal, a significant proportion of the 2% of Black students who attend Spring Street School would be redistricted to the Patton, leaving less than 1% of Black students at the Spring. Data regarding this detailed racial composition of each school is freely available online. It is clear that the redistricting committee did not carefully examine the available data regarding BIPOC students in our schools and perhaps took a higher level approach treating all non-white students as a monolith. The latter approach disadvantages BIPOC, Black and Hispanic students whose geographic distribution in town was likely not considered in this redistricting plan, and who may be disproportionately impacted by the plans that essentially leave the racial compositions of our schools intact in some instances and deepens the divide in others. In addition, a significant number of non-white, non-BIPOC students who live in this area will be redistricted to the Patton as well. Currently, Spring Street School has 29% non-white students. This will officially place Spring Street School in the racial isolation category. This will be a detriment to the community at large. If that is the case, we must report this to the Massachusetts Board of Education. In both proposals, all existing schools have a portion of their current students redistricted into the new BEAL, except for the Spring Street School Districts. It is believed by many concerned parents and residents that income, connectivity, and socioeconomic standing are playing a role in this decision. Currently, the Calvin Coolidge School and the Floral Street schools meet the MGL definition of being racially imbalanced, as over 65% of the students enrolled in both schools are non-white. Under proposals 18 and 19, these schools will remain racially imbalanced, even though the district has now been presented with a chance to remedy this imbalance by adding a portion of the Spring Street School student population to the Floral and some of the Floral to the Coolidge or Patton. It is evident Shrewsbury has neglected the duty and derivative to address racial imbalance in these redistricting plans, according to the Mass state law. It has also neglected to increase parity amongst our schools of both these elements should have received prominent consideration in any redistricting proposals. And also, in addition of being in violation to the mandate, it seems like many of the guiding principles put forth by this committee have not been adhered to. For example, school assignments will be determined by drawing attendance zone boundaries and should emphasize a neighborhood school approach. Well, both proposals call for Spring Street 4 school students to attend Patton, which is significantly further away than the currently assigned school, when more zones closer to the Patton from the Spring are more walkable. Again, this change disproportionately affects Black and Brown families in the Spring 4 zone, which are already underrepresented at the Spring Street School. And the committee did not take detailed racial and economic diversity into account in a substantive way, as the other guiding principles says detailed student demographics should be taken into account when redistricting school attendance zones. The demographic diversity of a school's student population should reflect the overall demographic diversity of our town to the greatest extent possible. And it was clear that that wasn't the case here. And the last one, the redistricting process should work in concert with the other district initiatives where possible. And like in much of the country right now, a large initiative we all know has been diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was not thoroughly considered thus far in the redistricting process. There has yet to be a reasonable and thoughtful approach to the school zoning that accounts for racial equity and other forms of equity and inclusion. So there is significant evidence here to conclude, based on the Massachusetts general law and guiding principles laid forth by Shrewsbury School and the redistricting committee, that both proposals put forth would fail the charge to the community at large by widening racial divide in the schools, failing to look into racial equity and demographics of future zones, and thus inadvertently perpetuate harm to our children. I urge you to vote to revise both proposals with racial and other equity considerations addressed in this letter before they are presented for a vote. And I'll just leave you with this last thought, because that's the end of the letter. I just want to make sure that our directive is very clear. We're not asking to go back and resurrect Proposal 16, which was a meager attempt to look at making things equal. Goodness, if we gave our Shrewsbury middle school students this map with a list of the problems to solve, they would have tackled the task much better than that. I say this to drive home the point that we need to be genuinely thinking about equity, but with practicality and common sense. Proposal 16 was a map that equally spread students across schools, but it is well documented in our history that equal is not always equitable. I remind you of a phrase, separate but equal. Here's what is equitable: making sure you do not further segregate one of the highest ranking schools in the state by looking into racial demographic of the various zones to ensure that they do not include at least one BIPOC student or non-white student, unless you plan to replenish the population of said school with another zone of equal or higher concentration of students of color. Because further segregating a school is unethical, immoral, and illegal. If this means you don't resolve the problem of slight overcrowding at the Spring Street School, because so be it, because Spring has the most financial resources allocated to it. That is what you call equitable. I'll end with this final thought. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. Green versus County School Board of New Kent County, 1968. And now, in 2021, when the President of the United States is calling for unity, decency, and inclusion amid a pandemic, what sickens me is the thought of being on the verge of yet another school segregation case. I call on the School Redistricting Committee and the Shrewsbury School Committee to do better, to do what is just, and least of all, to do no harm. Thank you.
Thank you for reaching out to us this evening, and we will definitely take your feedback into consideration. We will look at the legal frameworks that you have laid out, and the committee's decision will definitely reflect the information and analysis that we will be given. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Next, I see Diana Sladen, who has her hand up. And Diana, if you could, again, state your name and your address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Diana Sladen, and I reside at 7 Holman Heights Circle in Shrewsbury. And I want to start by thanking the Shrewsbury School Committee and the Redistricting Committee for the opportunity to speak this evening. I reside in Shrewsbury with my family, my husband, Eric, and our 2 young children, Phoenix, who is a first grader at Patton Elementary, and Lennox, who is in pre-K this year and will be in kindergarten next year within the Shrewsbury Public Schools. We relocated our family to Shrewsbury in 2018 from the state of Rhode Island. We sought to be a part of this community and also to provide our children with the educational opportunities that the town of Shrewsbury is best known for. Last year, I actually relocated my family law practice from Worcester to Shrewsbury as well, because I've enjoyed my time as a member of this community. In the short time that we have resided here, my family specifically has seen firsthand the power of community and excellence in education that Shrewsbury provides neighbors. We see that in our children's excitement to go to school every day. There's an overwhelming sense of collaboration between families and teachers, and even the school committee in asking for the parents to be involved in this really important decision. And we see a lot of parental involvement outside of the school boundaries as well. There's a sense of community in get-togethers when parents are either on Facebook and online forums, assisting each other with Power School and online learning, or simply just trying to figure out the best way to have your child pay attention during a Zoom class. When we learned about the potential redistricting affecting our child who loves Patton School, I obviously was very concerned. He's thriving right now. He feels that Patton is home for him. And I'm sure that, you know, the sentiments that we were feeling as a family was very much felt by other families within our town. So when the redistricting committee asked for feedback from the parents, I will admit I was very skeptical. I'd participated in the prior meetings. I submitted questions. I've looked repeatedly at the app GeoMaps, and I did submit feedback to the committee. And I know there are other parents within the community who has done that as well. I'm very moved by the fact that the redistricting committee has created scenario 19 as a result of the feedback that the parents have provided. The creation of scenario 19 in and of itself tells the families and taxpayers in Shrewsbury that our opinions matter, that our concerns for the best interests of our children are valid. The creation of scenario 19 empowers this community to actually participate in these processes where perhaps before, you know, there may not have been involvement in these types of decision making and, you know, community involvement. I am asking this evening for the support of the school committee in selecting scenario 19 on February 10th. It's my position that scenario 19 is the best scenario between 18 and 19 because it meets most of the guiding principles outlined by the redistricting committee at the onset of this task. We're maintaining neighborhoods for schools that it's important to be able to ride the bus with your peers or, you know, be in the same school and see them at recess or sit at lunch together. I think that's really important, particularly in a town where there are so many students and there is such a large population. To see a friendly face, especially at such a young age, is really important. I believe it minimizes the need for transportation to a further school. Right now, we live approximately a half mile from Spring Street, and we're 1 mile from Patton. So we are actually not eligible for busing, but we are slated in one of the scenarios to go to Patton School, which would make our children eligible for busing. So it's nice to be able to walk our children to school and engage in that with them in the morning. The biggest and I think most important guiding principle, though, is that scenario 19 displaces the least number of children, particularly in a year where our young children have been affected by COVID. They're learning from home. They're not in the school. They're not in the classroom with their teachers, who have done a wonderful job in trying to keep them as engaged as possible with their young formative years ahead of them in this stage of their education. Maintaining the continuity of the same school community and the same peers, I think, is really important. And I think, you know, to not have to uproot these children to a new school who have already created an identity with their current schools is crucial in this world where every day we don't know what's going to happen next and whether or not there's going to be another stay-at-home order. In my own role as in work as an attorney, time after time, clients consistently tell me, I just want the opportunity to be heard. I just want the opportunity to be heard. And I think this process has really helped me understand why that's so important to my clients, because the redistricting committee has heard my concerns as a parent within this town. I don't feel dismissed by this process or by the committee who has redrawn these lines. I certainly recognize how difficult this task has been. That is not lost on me. And what's nice to see as a parent receiving feedback is that my concerns were addressed, and I'm extremely appreciative as a parent that the feedback that you requested from us was actually wanted and not simply for a display of, you know, well, we're going to ask for feedback, but we're not really going to use it. So I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. And I once again ask for your support in voting in favor of scenario 19 on February 10th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana, for your input. Next I see it is Sudha, I'm going to make sure I pronounce your name right, Davajarajan.
Hi, good evening. So I'm Sudha Devarajan. Thank you for the opportunity for letting us talk today. I currently reside in number 2 Grove Meadow Lane. So in the current school chart that has been published, it shows that Grove Meadow Lane is in Coolidge 6, but we have kids in our street who are actually in Floral Street School. So since 2015, we actually have been in Floral Street School, but it's showing us Coolidge 6 even in the current state scenario. So we realized that just recently, earlier today, I had emailed, and I think a neighbor had emailed as well. So we did get back feedback that, you'd meet with AppGeo and get back to us. So I'm just hoping that, this will get sorted so that we just stay assigned to our current school, which is Floral, or the New Beale, which is very close to us, and not move to Coolidge just because it's showing incorrectly in the current state.
Great, thank you. And I'm actually going to turn this over to Mr. Collins.
Thank you.
Sure. No, and I appreciate you pointing that out. It was I'll call it a clerical error in drawing the original map, digital map of the original zones. And so you are correct in that will be fixed as part of this redistricting process to include Grove Meadow as part of, I believe it's Floral Street 6, I believe, is the correct zone. So my apologies for that occurrence, and that is an easy fix, and it just really restates what is actually in place and has been in place. So it's not it's not really a new scenario. It's just including a street that was put into the wrong component to begin with. So we can fix that easily.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking care of that for us. Thank you.
And thank you for checking on us as well. It's helpful. Thank you. Okay, next I see a hand up is Liz Mason.
Good evening. I wanted to thank everyone for your time tonight and for listening to, my email and responding to my emails regarding the redistricting and those of a number of my friends. I'm going to reiterate what Mrs. Port and Mrs. Sladen both said in regards to Patton 3 and Patton 4 being redistricted to Floral versus staying at Patton. Option 19 does indeed uproot the least amount of children. My children were both at a different school, and I removed them from those schools last year and brought them to the Shrewsbury school system because of how strong the community is. Additionally, we've recently moved, and we moved for a reason, so that we could stay within the same community and the same school system that we live. And the option 18 would send us 2.5 miles away versus 1/4 mile of Spring Street or 3/4 mile to the Patton School. I would encourage all of you to take a look again at the maps and the two options, 18 and 19, and see how 19 just works better for community schooling and not uprooting our children. Additionally, the traffic patterns associated with option 18 is going to cause a significant amount of issues for the people that are going to be coming from Patton 3 and Patton 4. And it's going to cause a lot of congestion on Main Street. So I suggest that you guys take a look at those two options, and I would request that you vote for option 19 when it comes down to it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for joining us. Okay.
Excuse me, Ms. Fritz, could we get Ms. Mason's address?
Oh, sorry about that. Ms. Mason, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. It's 45 Park Street.
Thank you. Okay, anyone? No one? I have people showing as attendees, but I do not see any hands up. So who would like to go next? And I have a few who have not spoken yet.
Mrs. Fritz, could we do a reminder for the process of folks raising their hands? I'm using the visual interface where you can click it under reactions, but I don't know if anyone is here by phone where they maybe need to indicate by a touch tone.
Right. It is when someone presses what it is. I will, I'm reading it. When someone presses their button, they will see the hand icon next to their name, and that will be recognized that they want to speak. Not seeing anyone. And again, these are individuals who did sign up, registered, that did want to speak this evening.
Madam Chair, I had thought, like Mr. Palach, that if people joined just by a regular telephone, they had to hit a different star or something. Is that?
That is not in the instructions that I have. Let me look.
Is it a *6?
I'm looking at another, hold on.
Mr. LaRue, is anyone actually joining us by telephone, or is everyone joined us by via computer?
Everybody's joining by computer actually right now. No one has requested to join by telephone.
Going twice. If anybody wants to speak, this is the time to do it.
And perhaps if we're having a technical issue on their side, Ms. Fritz, I'm wondering if Mr. LaRue might be able to ask them, and those who haven't participated yet, to briefly unmute, and then they can just signal whether or not they're interested in addressing the committee.
I see. Yeah. So Brian, would we be able to hear them if they spoke at this point?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, if anyone wants to speak up, please state your name.
Hi, good evening. This is Adiola Mbanume, again, 85 Colonial Drive. Another thing I wanted to ask, if you do consider bringing forth another proposal or revising the proposals that are put forth, we just ask that you include a detailed breakdown of the projected student demographics, similar to a demographic chart on the DESI school profile, where it details the demographic of students, of the student population by each race. And just for transparency's sake, that would be another ask. I just wanted to include that because I don't think I did in my first attempt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Looks like there's a hand up from a couple of folks here, Ms. Fritz.
And it looks like Jennifer Matheny.
Hi, this is Jen Matheny. I live on School Street.
What number School Street?
96.
Thank you.
And at first I was just so shocked to see so many kids who lived so close to their schools possibly have to move to schools where the majority of the other kids weren't leaving, and they would essentially be, a very small amount in a school full of kids already established. And, I wrote a bunch of emails and stuff, and I really appreciate that the redistricting committee has listened to parents' feedback and concerns and questions and whatnot. And I was very, very pleased to see that not just mine, but I can assume from many other Patton parents and Spring Street parents, that their concerns were heard in creating scenario 19. And, I just hope that the school committee looks at that one. And I know this is hard for everybody, and there's going to be a lot of happy people and probably a lot of unhappy people, but, scenario 19 really listens to, parents' concerns for their children who live the closest to the school, who might have been forced to move. And, you know, I think scenario 19 is the best option and meets as well as it can the criteria that were put forth. So just my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you for calling in. Okay, next it looks like, is it Jeremy? And I can't see the rest of your last name. It's blocked out.
Yeah, Jeremy Hilton.
Your address, Jeremy?
119 Gulf Street.
Thank you.
So we just moved here literally in July of last year. And we have been really blessed with what has happened at Patton because our son has special needs. And, you know, the amount of impact that's had for our son, where we came from another district, we've never seen anything like that. I mean, the teachers have dedicated their souls and their lives to helping our son in ways that we've never seen before. That just doesn't happen in other districts. And I just want to make sure that, you know, the impact of this doesn't impact kids like our son, our son's actually mixed, he's black and white. And, you know, affecting that disproportionately, you know, would be a bad thing. And essentially, we just really, you know, are grateful for the amount of work that we've seen go into our son. He's been doing things he's never done before. He's excelled in months that we couldn't even get him to. And we're just, you know, very grateful for the amount of services and time. And so I just, you know, my biggest concern in this process as you're going through this is really facilitating understanding kind of like, you know, where are you going to look at helping across that board? Because for kids with special needs, especially, you know, it's extremely important that they have that sort of, you know, that ability to get to that level. And he's even to the point where he's associating with peers, which he honestly struggled with before. He's now doing that. So for us, it's, you know, really looking at that picture. And I've heard other people commentate about how we're not looking at the disproportional factor. And that's a valid point, right? It's looking at that. And it's not just from race, it's also from disabilities. Like, we should be looking at all aspects of this type of thing, because in theory, you know, reality is that, you know, all of us that are going through these processes, especially for my son, for example, it's that sort of thing where, you know, he wants to fit in, he wants to know peers, he wants to have friends, and but the pandemic doesn't really make anything easier. But anyways, I want to give my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you very much for calling in. Okay, anyone else? I don't see any further hands up. Last chance. Okay, not seeing anybody else asking to speak this evening. And again, we are planning to take our vote on February 10th. Anyone can still email the school committee at schoolcommittee@shrewsbury.k12.ma.us. We still have plenty of time to hear from individuals who have any input that they want to give us on these options or anything else that they want us to hear about this redistricting plan. We're more than happy to do that. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote is required. Lindsay?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Myself, aye. The public hearing is closed. So thank you to everybody who participated this evening. We do really appreciate the input that we get from the community. We have received a significant amount of emails. This is a very important decision that we're going to have to make, and it is not an easy decision. But we are going to listen to everything and take everything into advisement and come to an agreement as we move forward as a community. And Dr. Sawyer, before we move forward, anything from you?
I would also like to thank all of the participants in the public hearing for providing their perspective and information. I will be making my own recommendation, as is my responsibility as superintendent, relative to the school committee for your February 10th meeting. And I will certainly have taken some careful notes, and I will certainly review those and think about opportunities to address questions or concerns that were raised in formulating my recommendation as well. And I look forward to doing that.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, Dr. Soria is going to provide his State of the School District report. This is an annual report that he provides to the committee and the community.
Thank you, Ms. Fritz. I'm going to have some slides. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can people see those slides? Whoops.
Yes.
Going backwards there already. So thank you for the opportunity. As has been the case for the last many years, I appreciate the opportunity in January to share my perspective on where we are as a school district. These are obviously extraordinary times, and I will try to keep my remarks focused on sort of a high-level thematic approach, not delving into great detail, but rather trying to give an overall impression to the community of what my perspective is as your superintendent. I don't have lots of bells and whistles with my slide deck. I'm sure other people could have done that better than I could, but I'll try to keep it simple and to the point. First off, as I stated last year, the same statement: our schools continue to provide an excellent education to our students and great value to our community. I want to add, however, that this is done while navigating the most challenging circumstances that our schools have faced, likely in most of our lifetimes. This is a legitimate crisis we've been managing for almost a year at this point, and it's something that is going to have long-lasting implications for education in Shrewsbury and the lives of the children and families and educators whom we serve. I do want to say right out that I could not be more proud of the staff members of the Shrewsbury Public Schools. They have done truly incredible work in response to this pandemic. I am just continually impressed is not a strong enough word to the way that our staff have adapted to the various changes. And I think it's important to note a variety of things, including the fact that not only have they done incredible work, it's been done in an environment of constant uncertainty and change. And at the same time, the vast majority of our staff, while they've worked undoubtedly harder than they ever have in their entire career, they have made personal financial sacrifices to avoid even deeper budget cuts than what we already faced. People may recall that prior to the pandemic, and we had to continue with these, we needed to institute almost $2 million in budget cuts over what we needed in 30 positions across the school district just in order to make this year's budget work. And those cuts would have been much deeper. The Professional Association, the Shrewsbury Education Association, represents our professional educators. Those are teachers and nurses and counselors and other professional education staff. They sacrificed collectively over $1 million in salary to help us avoid further cuts that would have further degraded the working conditions and learning conditions in our district. Our assistant principals did the same by deferring a compensation increase, and I appreciate that deeply. Our secretaries, our technology support staff, and our principals and central office administrators all took a zero in terms of any compensation increase this year at personal sacrifice, again, in working in a year that's more challenging than ever. And I deeply appreciate that was done and continue to be just blown away by what is happening on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to maintain the best possible learning environment for our students, despite the many challenges that the pandemic has presented. That pandemic has created, I think, the greatest crisis regarding the academic, the social, and the emotional needs of our children that we have faced in decades. We do not yet have a great handle on educationally where we're going to be after this year, but we know that there are going to be students whose growth has been delayed in terms of their academic achievement. It is my belief that because of the high quality work that our educators are doing with our students and the support that their families are providing them, which has been also remarkable, that we will be in a better place than lots of other places. But I don't want to underestimate the impact this may be having on our students, and that's something that over time we'll have to be able to determine where things stand collectively and individually with our students. However, it is also really critical to note that the social and emotional situation that many of our students find themselves in is unlike anything that we've seen, certainly in my career. In communications with our high school principal, Todd Bazidlo, recently, the number of students who have had major mental health crises is twice that what it was in a typical year. And that is something that is not abating at this point. We are very concerned for the mental health of our students, and it's critical that we address this. And so not only has it created the greatest crisis, our children are counting on us to help them. Obviously, our families will be helping support their own children, but this is what school districts need to do. School districts need to be the part of the community that primarily is responsible for helping students when they are in crisis or are experiencing challenges, obviously if it comes to their academic needs, but also for their social and emotional development and needs. So that's a critically important element to realize at this time. I think it's also important to note that our nation's dual crises that are of political and racial justice have created an atmosphere of divisiveness and trepidation, I would say, that has affected our educational climate in a variety of ways. We obviously cannot escape the facts of what is happening in society across America right now and here within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that obviously affects our Shrewsbury community, and it does come into our school communities as well. And I think it's very important that we need to respond to these crises in ways that reflect our core values as stated as a school district, particularly those core values of respect and equity. That's work that we've begun in earnest in a variety of ways. It's work that I feel sorry that we've not been able to advance further because of the enormous share of our time and effort that just responding to the day-to-day needs of the pandemic have taken place. And we will be reporting out in the at a future meeting as to some of the work we've done around equity since the summertime. But there is much more work to do, and it's work that we have to keep at the forefront of what we're looking to do to serve our children and our community well. We also have a very significant resource concern. We have a structural funding dilemma that our community has struggled with for years. And that funding dilemma threatens to severely compromise our ability to meet our students' needs. This is something that we'll refer to a little bit more in the presentation, but not only has that been something we've been struggling with for years, but at this time, this is at a critical time when our students need our strong support. So more than ever before, the situation that we have with resources available to us as a school district is going to come into play to make a difference as to what we are able to do for our students. And I do fear that we're going to have some really difficult times ahead, depending on how our community responds to this situation. So unfortunately, I have to tell you that as far as my perspective on the state of the district is that the quality of the education in the Shrewsbury Public Schools is in serious jeopardy. I think it's always important to think about how you can work from strengths when you're facing a serious threat. And I am confident that we have a strong vision. The Portrait of a Graduate that we created a number of years ago sets out a vision for what we want our students by the time they leave us and graduate from high school. And that is something that we were making some excellent progress on and has informed our strategic priorities, which I'll mention in a moment. And it lays out, I think, a vision that, and you just heard from families who have recently come to our community, who just testified in the previous public hearing, and talk about what their children are getting as a result of the incredible work that our educators do with a vision that focuses on these elements that you can see in the graphic, whether that's the academic elements of critical thinking and content, whether that is resilience and helping our students focus, whether that's helping them become innovative thinkers, helping them to collaborate and communicate effectively, to be aware of their global environment and be good citizens who engage with their community. And finally, leadership, whether that's leadership, not by role, but by action, and having the ability to influence others. These are all things we want for our children, and it's a vision that I think is very compelling and causes us to be thoughtful about how we approach the work we do in our schools. We do also have important priorities. We're in the midst of a strategic plan. Obviously, a lot of these things have had to be put on hold as we deal with the crisis over the past year. But in a variety of ways, we continue to look at that vision of a portrait of a Shrewsbury graduate, and we determined over a 5-year period, here's the areas we want to leverage our energy and our resources to try to make things better and advance in key areas. And you can see what those are there. I've also always been deeply appreciative in the 2 decades plus I've been in Shrewsbury as a school administrator about the community support for our infrastructure. And we now have a community supported solution to our elementary school space needs in the new Beal School, which if anyone had the fortune to watch the Beal School Committee meeting, building committee meeting with the latest drone flyover, the progress has been incredible. It is an outstanding school project that's going to have an outstanding physical facility for learning that's going to last for 50 years plus for this community. It's a wonderful project. But I fear that some of the limitations that we're experiencing now as a community financially are going to put in jeopardy what we as a community set out to do, which is to create more equitable learning spaces and opportunities across all of our schools, redistribute our students in a way that creates that equity. And it is going to take a significant investment in order to properly open this school with a proper level of staffing. And I am very concerned about what that looks like based on some of the initial information we have about what the coming budget year is going to look like. And that's something that I think it's important for the community to understand and note. We'll be providing some more specific details when we launch our budget on February 10th. But again, we have an excellent community supported solution, but we need to be able to execute that solution for the benefit of our students. Again, this structural funding dilemma is longstanding. I went back to some slide presentations I've made over the last several years. 5 years ago in January 2016, when I presented the initial budget for the coming school year, you can see the quote that I indicated that I believed at that time our community was not going to have sufficient financial resources to fund the budget plan that we needed. And we did end up making reductions in the 2016-2017 school year. In subsequent years, I've asked this question in multiple different budget presentations to town boards, whether that's the finance committee, town meeting. And this question is there in italics. What will our community do to solve the structural funding dilemma that jeopardizes the future quality of public education in Shrewsbury? Again, that goes back to being posed in 2018. Here we are in 2021, and we do not yet have an answer to that question. And if we don't answer that question, unfortunately, the future possibility of what I would say are significantly compromised educational quality issues, that is now dangerously close to becoming our reality in Shrewsbury. So again, I have to ask the question, what will our community do? Because this is a community dilemma and it needs to be solved by the community. And so what I'll leave you with is that I believe we need 3 key things in the coming weeks and months in order to address these things. I think that we need transparency, which I think has been a hallmark of the work that the school committee and the school administration has done over my tenure at least, and certainly previous to that, in terms of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the details are behind that. And when we're talking about budget and financial resources, all the details And of course, our website is a rich source for those who are curious and interested in that. We need advocacy and we need leadership. But I would also suggest that the reasons why we need those things, we need transparency because we need to build trust. We need advocacy for what our kids and our educators need in order to be successful, in order to do the job of helping our students be successful. And we need leadership to do what's right for our children in our community. And when I say leadership, just as we teach our children with our vision of a Portrait of a Shrewsbury graduate, that leadership is not just something that comes to you or is to those who have a position of authority or power. Leadership is something that people can exercise regardless of their position in order to influence how things go relative to something important that we're trying to accomplish. And we are going to need leadership from across this community to solve these problems. So with that, I truly wish that I had a better perspective or more positive one relative to the situation our district is in right now. I will tell you that I am frustrated that in the coming weeks and months, I expect that the leadership team of our school district is going to be spending, along with the school committee, will be spending significant time and energy on trying to resolve how we can maintain what we have and avoid doing further damage to our school district. When all of that energy and time, as much as humanly possible, should be devoted to figuring out ways to get our schools reopened and to continue to deal with the crisis that's before us with COVID, as well as the variety of other issues that I've illustrated earlier in this presentation. And I frankly envy school districts that are not constantly churning through fiscal crises because they have a structural issue that has not been yet addressed. There are possibilities that we'll get some additional help from the federal government that may be helpful in the coming year. A lot of the help, of course, we've received so far and continue to receive is dedicated to helping us manage specific costs related to COVID. And those will not address the structural deficits that we face relative to having enough resources for us to operate our schools in a way that our community expects and that our students deserve. So with that, I will conclude my presentation, and I'd be happy to hear any comments or questions that the committee has.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Any questions or comments from the committee? Who'd like to go first? Jason.
I want to thank the superintendent for his presentation. Very direct, very to the point, very sobering. Nothing that is any surprise to us on this committee, but may certainly be surprising to members of the community. I am not pleased that we are in this situation, to put it mildly. We are facing a severe financial crisis, as the superintendent has indicated. We are facing a situation that threatens real harm to the programming that Shrewsbury Public Schools is able to offer the community. This is a crisis that is going to need to be solved through leadership, not management. This is a town that does not have the revenues necessary to meet the service expectations of residents, the Shrewsbury that people know and love, the reason that people came here or stayed here. That community depends, or the services that make up that town depend on a revenue stream that is not there. We are a very well-managed community, and that has gotten us as far as we are, but no one can manage their way out of this severe and growing structural deficit. Those of you who are long-term watchers of school committee know, but some of you may not. The school committee, the five of us and our team here, do not get to set the revenues that go to Shrewsbury Public Schools. We are advocates. We are advocates to other actors in town and other actors in government as to the revenues that are necessary to run this district. We will continue to be aggressive and clear in our advocacy, but my message to the community tonight, to anyone who is watching, is that we need new voices to reach new ears. If you are concerned with this, we need you to speak up. We need you to make your concerns known. If you have detailed thoughts on the town's finances, go ahead and offer them. If you just are interested in expressing your broad concern for the state of Shrewsbury Public Schools and its funding going forward, I think that is important to express as well unto itself. Other entities in town government need to hear that. We know from redistricting tonight that we do have a very passionate, very dedicated community out there that cares a lot about Shrewsbury Public Schools. This is a crisis that's going to necessitate your involvement in order for us to be able to address. And I just want to close by offering up a quote that's offered up a lot, which is that budgets are moral documents. What we fund is what we value. We as Shrewsbury residents know what makes this a great place to live. We know what Shrewsbury values. We need to fund what Shrewsbury values to prove that it is something that Shrewsbury values.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So first off, I do want to thank the staff. You can hear me, right? I'm not. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I just want to take a step back and thank the staff and done incredible work in response to the pandemic. And I mean, let's be honest, the last year has been, challenged with constant uncertainty and change and a variety of challenges. I know I can speak as a parent of a graduate of the class of 2020 and as a freshman at SHS. I mean, our educators are on the front lines to our students' reaction to the world events. And I'm thankful for their daily positive impact on our students. These teachers remain as really the last level of normalcy that we had prior to COVID. So it's really important to their social, emotional well-being. And I want to thank our educators and also our leadership for doing an incredible job, especially over the last year. But we know financially, all towns and municipalities are struggling to provide level services. Post-COVID, there's a strain on commercial tax revenue, which has further exacerbated what was a pre-COVID structural deficit in Shrewsbury. So there's been no surprise. We've known about this for many years, at least the 6 years that I've been on school committee. We've known about this. And as Dr. Sawyer mentioned, the only way to balance the current year's budget was by cutting $2 million, which required the shared sacrifice of leadership and our educators to get that gap down to zero, right? So we were very fortunate that we didn't have to make any further cuts, but we still had to make $2 million in cuts. And as you continue to chip away, the quality will be impacted just by the fact that we don't have the necessary funding to carry level services over. So it goes back to the question we've asked each of the last 6 years that I've been here, is that what will our community do to solve this structural deficit? And again, this predates COVID. We know we did a 5-year budget projection back in 2017, this committee did. I think it was the current year's projection was about 99% accurate. So again, we've known about this for a while. We've known about it well before the pandemic. And it really is going to take that transparency and leadership to further the needs of our students. And as my colleague said, we don't control the purse strings here. Like we're advocates for schools in this town. So it will take leadership to get us to where we need to be. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Lindsay.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor and repeat, but in this case, it's important to. And I think we are all very much aligned. I didn't coordinate with Mr. Palich, but I also pulled out a quote for me that feels really important about the difference between management and leadership. Peter Drucker said, management is doing things right, and leadership is doing the right things. The question right now is, what is the right thing for this community? We know we have an efficient, strong, and student-focused district. We employ great staff who also consistently achieve great results for our kids and for our community. Those of us who've had the preview and who've been paying attention know we have a serious budget deficit. In addition to having lived through a tumultuous COVID year, and as we're still moving through it, that has added levels of uncertainty we have never seen before. Last year's budget was my first budget on this committee, and we cut, as has been said, nearly $2 million and 30 full-time equivalents from our staff. We lost programming that I don't know how we get back. We have to make massive budget reductions. We're at risk of not being able to open or provide the level of services at Beal that we have promised to our community and that they have funded. I'm so excited about that building and how it's going, but I want to see it filled with all the kids and the parents who voted for that and said, yes, we want to support this. This is important for our community. And we're doing that. We're going to have to make those choices in the next 5 and 6 months. While we know that what we should be doing is investing more in education, that we have to mitigate the harm of this last year, that our educators have tried, and I am very impressed with them, but there is no way that anyone can look at this and say, this is perfect, and the kids are all right, right? We have a lot more work that we should be doing as a community. So when I think about what is leadership ask of us, what is the right thing, for me, the answer is very clear, that it's about advocating for our kids and for our district. I see no way to avoid major service reductions without a significant increase in town revenues. The vast majority of our budget comes from this local community that over and over again keeps telling us they want to support our kids. And so that is my faith that we know they're there, and that while times have been busy and it's been hard to pay attention and the news cycles are just crazy, that there is no one else who's coming to save us right now. And so it's up to us as a local community to look at that seriously and ask the question of, are we doing enough and could we do more? And I think the answer we're gonna conclude is yes, we can and we should and we will.
Thank you, Lindsay. Dale?
So I'd like to thank Dr. Sawyer for this presentation and for all he does. In addition to managing the COVID epidemic's effect on the schools and the issues regarding racism and redistricting, he also is faced with this impending budget disaster that is coming up. And I'd like to thank him for all he does and just remark that it seems that as the weight gets heavier, his shoulders get bigger, and he's doing a wonderful job, and thank you for that. The term structural deficit means that by design, almost, a well-run school district's cost each year goes up by more than the average revenues of a town. And periodically, the town has to address this and see if an override is indicated. We did that in 2014. We are at that point again. We are facing a multi-million-dollar deficit coming up that will lead to substantial cuts that have been greater than we have seen in the past. And we as a school committee have done all we can to scrutinize the budget, which shows that we are educating students in this district for less money per student than the vast majority of other districts. We have a highly efficient district. We also, as a school committee, have advocated to the selectmen and to others as much as we can to see if we can promote the idea of an override, because that's what we need to help us. Money is not going to come from the sky. No donor is going to make enough of a difference, and we need to face this responsibility ourselves. So the ask here for those who may be watching is that the next step, if you would like to advocate, is to advocate to the selectmen, because that is where the decision rests next. And we need to make sure that they understand that we have a community that is very concerned about education and is willing to meet its responsibilities for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I've been involved as a parent for a long time. I started when my children were in Floral, when Joe was an assistant principal. So I've been involved for a long time, and issues with budgets and structural deficits have been around for a long, long time. And this is a community that has dealt with what is like a negative cycle. We look at our budgets, we do the best we can, we move forward, but you can't keep moving forward when you're not adding. You continually dig that hole. And we have an amazing district. We always do really well, but that doesn't, you can't continue that cycle. And we're at that point again where we did have an override. It was successful, but we're moving forward after, well, what we're in a very challenging time. And again, as a school committee, we see the challenges firsthand. The community sees a lot of what's happening, but we also see what teachers and administration are dealing with behind the scenes. I have never seen a more challenging time for our schools. We can't thank our administrators and our teachers for what they're doing, and we can't thank our parents, excuse me, and our students, because the amount of stress that's happening in the community is tremendous. But what concerns me is also the budget, because when this hit last March, we were going into a bad budget cycle. We reduced $2 million, and it all got lost in the noise of COVID, but it didn't go away. So now we're moving into another very difficult budget cycle. We're concerned about the opening of this new school. That is a major concern as we look at the new budget cycle. We're concerned as we move into reopening school in September. What will that look like? How will we provide educational services to students who are coming off of one of the worst educational years that anybody can remember? So, you know, this isn't whining, this isn't complaining, this is reality as we move forward. And as my colleagues have stated, it's about community discussions. Where do we move forward? What are our priorities? And it is about revenue and how do we continue an excellent school system? What do we prioritize? What do we want to preserve? And that's what we need to do as we move forward. I want to thank Dr. Sawyer for starting this conversation. We are going to launch our budget on the 10th as we move forward. The municipal budget will also be launched. I believe it's going to be on the 16th, and then we will know what the gap is. What is the gap that we're going to have to fill? And that is where we really have to start having the community work with us, work with the Board of Selectmen as to figure out what we're going to do to move forward. So that's where we are today. It's the beginning of this discussion, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Sawyer for any closing comments.
Thank you, Ms. Fritz, and thank you to each of the members for your comments and support. I think I would just wrap up by saying that sharing with you and those watching that I have the great privilege tomorrow to take a personal day and drive with my wife, drive our oldest daughter out to UMass Amherst to go to school on campus for the first time as a freshman. And so she attended Shrewsbury Public Schools from kindergarten through grade 12. And I could not be more grateful for what she received as a student, not only academically, but the kind of support she received that helped her develop as a person. And I know she is well prepared for the next step in her educational journey. And it gives me great pride that she is a graduate of the Shrewsbury Public Schools. Having been in Shrewsbury now for, I can't know the exact, we're over 2 decades, and having so many students who I had the opportunity to work with when I was administrator of Floral Street and then Oak, and then as assistant superintendent and superintendent now, go on to become successful adults, some who have gone far and some who are right here still in our community. And I think it is incumbent upon us to make sure that the quality education that they received is something that students who are coming up now and beginning their education with us and working through the years and going towards to completing it at Shrewsbury High School receive the same consideration and receive the same opportunities because that is what I believe our community has a responsibility to provide. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts. We'll look forward to presenting the budget document to you on February 10th. We'll provide some more specific information that gets at some of the themes that were identified this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Okay, moving on. We're going to have a vote on the SHS program of studies. At our meeting on January 10th, Mr. Bazillo, high school principal, along with Mr. Almeida, presented to us the proposed changes for the SHS 2021-2022 program of studies, and you all received the complete program of studies in your booklet for this meeting. Are there any questions, changes? Seeing none. Dr. Sawyer, any questions?
No questions. I appreciate the work that the high school leadership team and educators did to put this together. I think it's an excellent program. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to provide as much of it as we possibly can.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion that the school committee vote to approve the Shrewsbury High School 2021-2022 program of studies?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote is required. Dale?
Aye.
Lindsay?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion carries. Okay, next, under policy, we were going to have our second reading under the policy on Title IX requirements. Council Sarah Spatafor has returned the policy to us, and Ms. Malone and Dr. Sawyer will need to review it. So if there are no objections, I suggest that we push this to our meeting on February 10th. Is that okay with everyone? All right, Ms. Malone, Dr. Sawyer, you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so we'll move that. Next, under approval of minutes, we have our minutes from the school committee workshop held on January 19th, 2021, and the school committee meeting held on January 20th, 2021. Are there any changes or corrections? Seeing none, they can be marked as accepted as distributed. And we have nothing further this evening. If there is nothing, may I have a motion that we adjourn for the evening?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote is required. Dr. McGee?
Aye.
Ms. Heffernan?
Aye.
Mr. Wensky?
Aye.
Mr. Palich?
Aye.
Myself? Thank you and good night.